Jesse saved 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own. He stood up to the shooter. My 6-year-old son, I found a message that Jesse had written on our kitchen chalkboard sometime shortly before he died. 3 words, phonetically spelled because he was just learning how to write in first grade: nurturing, healing, love. And I was floored. And I realized in the moment, that's the solution right there. It's so simple. Love, connection, belonging make people feel good. If you feel good, you're not going to want to harm someone else.
Feeling lost?
Then you're in the right place.
I'm Amanda Knox.
And I'm Christopher Robinson.
And this is Labyrinths.
After the loss of her son Jesse during the Sandy Hook mass shooting, it would have been easy for Scarlett Lewis to become angry and vengeful, living the rest of her life bitter and cold. Most people would understand. But would railing against the young man who murdered her son and 26 others bring her peace? Instead, Lewis explored a different coping mechanism, one of mindfulness and empathy, 2 practices that led her to create the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement.
I will start with the Sandy Hook tragedy. I will say that I've experienced a lot of loss and trauma before then. So then coming to this point in my life where I'm a parent of a 6 and 12-year-old, single, working full-time, just a very normal person. One morning, taking my child, as Jesse's dad says, to school with a book bag and then picking them up in a body bag is so devastating, brings you to your knees, obviously forces this deep reflection and, what's really important and what's my responsibility in not only what happened, but the world in which we live. What kind of world do I want to leave my children? And also, as important, how am I going to role model for my 12-year-old son who is watching every move that I make, listening to my words, but more importantly, every gesture, every gesticulation, and even my energy? He's learning from me in the moment how to move through difficulty, roadblocks, trauma. How am I going to conduct myself? What's the best version of myself that I actually want him to be when he grows up? All of this was running through my mind after the tragedy.
I don't know if it's totally obvious to people that you would have that level of self-reflection in a moment of such immense, overwhelming crisis. Like, I imagine, I've never had to experience that level of loss, but I do have children and I have lost a friend very suddenly and out of the blue, out of nowhere. And I remember being utterly in shock and kind of in denial for a good second while everyone around me is like, here's what's happening. I'm like, is that really what's happening? Do you feel that your ability to have self-awareness in that moment was coming from a mom instinct? Was it disassociation?
What a great question. I think that it's a number of things. I think that I was experiencing shock. However, I had practiced mindfulness in my life. I come from a base of very strong faith and spirituality. So that was already there. I already had knowledge of where Jesse was. And so it was how to be present in the moment, working from the logic and reasoning part of my brain, not being stuck in freeze, fight, or flight. I did not want to be another victim. I didn't want my son to be another victim. And I had practiced intensively mindfulness in my life And I practice being mindfully present with my kids, which, by the way, is the key to living your life with the fewest regrets, is being present with the ones that you love. Increasingly more difficult, I will say, now than it was then. I didn't walk around with my cell phone glued to my hip then. This was 11 years ago, but we do now, and I do too. My friends told me later that at the firehouse where the kids were evacuated to, and we were supposed to be reunited with them. I don't remember doing this, but they were telling me that I was texting them, Jesse's with Jesus. So I already had that understanding and that faith in my mind. So I was really focused on my 12-year-old son, who happened to be with me that day. He had been in middle school in lockdown. He asked if he could wait with me because, we were told, though, they're just looking for the kids. They're hiding. It's going to take a while for us to find them. And of course, to me, that made total sense. I was picturing Jesse having taken a small contingent of kids into the woods that surrounded the school. And so when my older son asked if he could wait, I was saying, yeah, of course you can come and wait. And then when we find Jesse, believing everything that we were told, he'll want his older brother. It was a practice of mindfulness. It was faith. It was determination to not be a victim. And conversely, that means taking whatever part of the responsibility that I needed to take, even if it was just, hey, I live in this community. My son goes to this school. This is happening in our world, and I need to be part of the solution. And so it was all of that together.
You mentioned as we began this conversation that this was not your first experience of trauma and loss. And I'm wondering if you are open to talking about previous experiences and how they informed your ability to react to this very extreme one in the moment.
Gosh, well, I think my first major loss was my parents' divorce. And that was very traumatic, dramatic.
How old were you?
I was 18.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And it was horrible circumstances. And I think it changed me forever.
How so?
That's a really good question. I need to really explore that with my therapist. And in fact, by the way, I have my entire life. I've been in therapy. I love therapy. I mean, how wonderful is it to be able to talk to somebody as things unfold in your life and get a different perspective, make sure you're on the right track. I think that I've had a hard time with relationships since then, and trust and wanting to be in control, but kind of realizing that what I thought was control wasn't. Hence the single parent that I have been almost the entire time that I've had 2 kids with 2 different dads, married once, but very shortly, and then not married again. I struggle with relationships. And the interesting thing is, ironically, the program that I've chosen to run focuses on love, connection, and belonging as being the solution to really so much of the suffering that we're seeing out in the world that ultimately leads to violence against the self and others. It leads to substance abuse, mental illness. That is really at the core. And I needed to study it for myself. I needed to learn the skills and tools. And as you started this out very aptly, the awarenesses required to be able to have healthy relationship and meaningful connections, to find meaning, even in the midst of pain, to assign an appropriate meaning so that I can move forward without suffering. Really what I wanted was joy after Jesse's murder at Sandy Hook. I just remember thinking, we had joy before with my 2 boys, and that's what I want again. And how do I get from here to there? And I spoke to people, I investigated, I read books, and I realized there's really no roadmap out there that's going to lead me directly to joy, to where I want to be. And so I decided to create it myself. And that is the Choose Love movement.
Hmm. I love that. I want to sort of stay with that moment. You know that Jesse's been murdered. You understand that there was a young man who came in and murdered all these innocent people. There are other parents around you. Were you talking to them as this information was unfolding? And if so, did you feel like you were aligned in the way that you were experiencing or processing this information intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, or did you find yourself a little bit apart?
I think that the Sandy Hook families, and there were 26 of them, were very aligned. We were tragically blessed, I say, to have one another, because we all suffered that horrific loss together. And so there was a lot of connection, especially during the first few years. I mean, we faced difficulties together. And we weren't friends in the beginning. And, after a while, kind of ideologies split us apart. And the ways that we chose to honor our kids, the solutions that we identified that we wanted to be a part of, I think it's really extraordinary out of the Sandy Hook tragedy, how many parents did start organizations that put good out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's absolutely amazing. I did go to therapy with a few of the families for years after, and that was really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Some moms of the victims got together, and I just felt really close with them. And, we had the love of the world. And we felt it. And I felt that immediately. And I really took that in, and I really was present with it and appreciated it and relished it. All of the notes of love and support and handmade gifts and hand knit shawls. And it was extraordinary. And over half of everything that we received was from children. I'm so sorry for your lost, LOST.
Yeah.
Just,
Ugh.
because it's that pain that we often overlook that is such a powerful connector. Pain has a purpose in our lives. And instead of fearing it and resisting and avoiding or numbing ourselves, really, it's so important to be present with it, to sit with it for a while, to get curious about the lessons that are in there, be fascinated by how pain strengthens you. There's science behind it. It's called post-traumatic growth. And we've added that to the movement that I created, because it's so important that you set the intention with kids and give them the awareness that pain has a purpose and it's there to help you grow. And it's such a
Mm-hmm.
powerful connector. I mean, I feel so blessed to be sitting here and able to have this conversation with you, and look where we're going. It stems from pain, and that's okay, because look at the messaging and everything that has come from that. And, even you in your life and your experience, Amanda, what the messaging and the interviews that you do that stem, I'm sure, in part from the situation that you went through.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah, of course, right? I think that that's a message to everybody today, that there's so much dis-ease in our country and in our world. So many people are suffering. And I think we really need to just pause and think about how that's going to help us grow and how we can learn lessons from it. Because unless we do that, it is pointless and for nothing. And then it does lead us down a dark path.
at what point did you feel like you understood why this happened and therefore what the solution was to this kind of problem?
So I have to say that my 6-year-old son, Jesse, gave me the answer to that. Because I came home to this little farmhouse that I shared with my 2 boys, and I found a message that Jesse had written on our kitchen chalkboard sometime shortly before he died. 3 words, phonetically spelled because he was just learning how to write in 1st grade: nurturing, healing, love. And I was floored. And I realized in the moment, that's the solution right there. It's so simple. Love, connection, belonging make people feel good. If you feel good, you're not going to want to harm someone else. And it was so simple to me. And this other little piece of information helped as well. And that was the fact that Jesse saved 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own. He stood up to the shooter and directed his friends to run. The beautiful thing is, Amanda, those kids that he saved recently graduated from high school and talked about Jesse's bravery in their interviews, which is really beautiful.
Wow.
Bittersweet, I was calling it. Bitter, obviously, but sweet that they were giving him credit. I learned that very early on. And in the face of that tremendous courage by your 6-year-old son, the courage that I saw his older brother, who was 12 years old, the courage that he had to go back to school and to start his own organization to help people halfway across the world, I was like, gosh, if my boys have this much courage, I certainly have the courage to quit my job. And by the way, that was scary. I was a single mom. I had health benefits and I was living month to month. But I thought, I have to do something to be part of the solution. What happened to Jesse was 100% preventable. And see, before that, I never thought anything like that would happen to me. And plus I thought, what can I do? What can somebody like me do? I'm really focused on my family, my 2 boys. I'll make sure that they're the best men that they can be. But after Jesse's murder, I realized, wow. So we all are responsible for what's going on in our communities, in our world. By the way, blaming, finger pointing, fault finding, waiting for somebody else to come in here and fix it for us. I don't know about you, but that has never worked for me.
No.
All this came down on me and I thought, wow. So I remember actually my first interview after Jesse's tragedy, and I'm standing in my mom's kitchen, she's standing next to me, and I made the statement, I take my part of the responsibility for what happened to Jesse in his school, in this community. And I remember I hang up and she said, don't ever say you take your part of the responsibility because it's not your fault. He was going to school. He was there by law. And I said, you know what? If I don't, who will? Who will?
That is a powerful thing to say, here I am, one could argue, an ultimate victim of this tragedy. My son was just obliterated and there's no recovering from that. And I understand your mom's perspective of as parents, we automatically take fault, especially as women, we automatically take the blame. And she's wanting to protect you from that. But what a powerful statement of I'm taking it because we all are a part of what happened. Do you think that you would feel the same way had the shooter not killed himself and had been apprehended?
It's a great question. I do. I have spoken to school shooters. I'm the crazy mom that goes out there and I want to ask them the question that I don't believe anybody else is asking. And that is, how did we fail you? And because they weren't born mass murderers. No one is born a mass murderer. So what happened between the time you were born and when you committed this heinous crime? what amount of pain, anguish, abuse, bullying, what happened to you that made you get to a place in your life where all you knew to do was take out your anguish on someone else? Obviously, somebody that feels good about themselves, that has self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, they're not going to be murdering other people.
Mm-hmm. And what do they say?
Yeah, really interesting, right? I've had some amazing conversations. I had a former shooter on one of my book clubs. I've had a couple of podcasts. I've spoken to one in prison. And by the way, I can boil it down to a few words, what they all say. And that is wanting to be seen.
Wow.
Wanting to be seen for who they are. And, not feeling worthy of being seen. So in other words, putting on this persona of how they're seen, how they feel. So darkness, anger. And I had one of them tell me, he was so horribly abused by his family. He had probably the worst origin story I have ever heard. And he said that if anybody was kind to him, he would treat them so that they would understand they were wrong. He was not worthy of kindness and love. But really, we all just want to be seen for that highest and best self, our potential, who we truly are in our hearts, which is love. And instead, I think we tend to get frustrated with people who are behaviorally challenged. And of course, what is that? That is simply acting out how you're feeling.
Right. In a not effective means, but yes, it is an expression. Yeah.
Right. And then that whole movement to ask the question, what happened to you, rather than what's wrong with you. I think it's really important that people are crying out for love. And if they're given it in enough time, they're not going to go on to commit mass murders. These are people that are in a lot of pain. I wanted to kind of break the stigma of people calling other people evil. I'll get texts today if something happens, and I'll look down at my phone and I'll see the words evil, monster. I think, oh no, what happened? And I'll look up the news. And I want people to understand these are human beings in pain. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in jail.
Sure.
Doesn't mean for life. I'm not saying that they're not responsible for what they do. I'm not saying it's not horrendous. Look, my son was brutally murdered alongside 19 other first graders and 6 educators. I know how horrendous this is, but I think that if we could move past labeling and seeing kids as bad and give more love, that I think that we could get ahead of this issue. That's really been my position, proactive prevention, especially in school safety. So if you look at the pathway to violence that the Department of Homeland Security uses, they're usually steps that land in an attack, and it starts with a grievance. Usually we're reactive. We focus on the problem. I mean, look at the war on drugs, anti-bullying, fighting against. And of course, with school safety, we focused on the attack end, and I am all for that, by the way. And by the way, we had all of the latest technology in Sandy Hook. We had the door locks. We had all of it. Focusing on that attack end and being reactive is always a step behind. There's so many times that I have people coming up to me, especially police officers. Wow, Sandy Hook changed everything. And every shooting, they take it and they pull it apart and they learn from mistakes and what they didn't do, what they could have done. And that needs to be done. Absolutely. We need to fortify our schools. Unfortunately, however, if we do not focus on the grievance end, and that is giving kids the skills and tools they need to manage that grievance within themselves, and by the way, grow through it, because that's why pain is there in our life. It's there to get us out of our comfort zone into our growth zone. It's called post-traumatic growth. It's a thing. We're designed as human beings to grow through difficulty. There are specific skills and tools and awarenesses, as you said, to be able to manage that grievance. And if we can do that, then we reduce and prevent the suffering that leads to all the issues that we're seeing. And we can do it. We just have to shift a little bit of our focus and resources, time, energy, money, towards proactive prevention.
Right. I love that because I feel like that has a ripple effect throughout society, like targeting young people and their experience of the things that happen to them in the world and the inevitable painful things that happen is not just going to prevent violence, it's going to prevent all kinds of harms that don't find expression in violence. It could potentially even prevent wrongful convictions because maybe we'll have a more rational outlook when something bad happens and we don't just automatically have this impulse to blame somebody at all costs, even if it's the wrong person, and instead really like be grounded in solutions and problem solving and truth. Can you talk a little bit more about your program specifically and what are those tools and skills that you think kids should be exposed to and have practice in, and how you are implementing that on a practical level?
Can I just say one thing about blame?
Yeah.
Because that was so beautiful and it's so true. I mean, we have a tendency to blame. And after Sandy Hook, that's what I saw. I stepped back, I watched, and there was blame flying. You were either pro-gun or anti-gun, and each were blaming the other. And there was so much blame put on of course, Adam Lanza. He was the former student who came back to his elementary school, and his mother who had given him access to the guns. It was blame as an absolute blame. And I thought, wow, that just doesn't work for me, because if it were all their fault, it would never have happened before. It would never happen again. It's so true. We have to move through the blame and start figuring out solutions. So this all kind of resulted in the Choose Love movement and this essential life skills program that I developed with so many experts. Honestly, it was skills and tools that I didn't have, that I needed to move through and model for my son. It's based on neuroscience and positive psychology and mindfulness and science around optimism and post-traumatic growth, all on a trauma-informed base. It's this synthesized version of the best put into one program, and I made it no cost. Because this would have saved my son's life. If this had been in Adam Lanza's classroom, this would have saved my son's life. I am absolutely sure of that. So I wanted to make it free because I wanted to get it out to as many people as possible. It's kind of a combination of all of the latest science and neuroscience of thriving and flourishing. We do it under an umbrella of a Choose Love formula, which is designed to bring your locus of control back inside of you. So location of your personal power, because it can be outside of you. And when it's outside of you, you do blame other people for where you are. You feel helpless. And by the way, that's a victimized kind of mindset, which can lead to hopelessness.
Totally. I've had that experience, right? Like you're in a prison cell.
Absolutely. And it's important that people who are listening understand that everybody to a certain degree has felt that. And our locus of control goes in and out based on situations. But you want to have the skills and tools to be able to move that back inside you, where you have the power to create positive change in your life. That's the definition of hope. And so when you have your locus of control inside of you, you feel good about yourself. You have self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, and you have the power to make things happen in your life. You take responsibility. So this formula starts with courage. I'm sure that that is not surprising. And of course, for the older kids, we use Jesse's example of courage when he stood up to the shooter at 6 years old. And, we say that capacity for courage is in everyone. And we're not talking about having to stand up to a shooter. The vast majority of people will never have to do that. I don't want anybody to have to do that. It's having the courage to be kind when someone's not kind to you. It's the courage to do the right thing instead of what's just easy. It's the courage to tell the truth. It's the courage to pause when something is happening and get curious about why the person is behaving the way that they are, and be able to, instead of react in anger and escalate things, thoughtfully respond with love, which is always the highest and best response. And then we move into gratitude. There is character and social and emotional development skills, healthy relationships, responsible decision-making, all of this. We go into gratitude, which of course can shift your lens from negative to positive. Probably most people don't know, but the vast majority of our thoughts every day are negative, and over 95% are repetitive. And your thoughts directly impact how you feel, which then determined how you behave. And what do you have control over? Your thoughts. So we talk a lot about that, and we use positive affirmations, the ability to shift your lens from negative to positive, which gives you optimism and ultimately hope. And then we talk about forgiveness. And of course, this has been a huge tool in my life to move me through the anger that I had after the tragedy. I forgave Adam Lanza. Knowing that someone that could do something so heinous must have been in a tremendous amount of pain. And of course, it came out that he was bullied at school, and he had special needs that were known and not met. This was kind of a theme throughout his life. He didn't have the skills and tools to be able to manage that. Neither did his mother, who never received the help and support that she needed and asked for. So forgiveness is really an important part. It's interesting because if you look at the decades of research behind the benefits of forgiveness for the person who forgives, really probably the number one benefit is healthy relationships. And Harvard University just did the longest ever study on human life, 3 generations, about 85 years. It's called the Grant Study. And they found that healthy relationships were the key to happiness. How do you get healthy relationships? Through forgiveness and some other skills and tools. And they are skills and tools. And by the way, here's the kicker. We're not born with them. We have to learn them. And if you are blessed enough to grow up in a family that has all of these skills and tools, I was not. Even if you are, you still need to practice them.
How has this practice been for your own son? And, now you said this was 11 years ago. He was 12, so he's 23.
He's 24. Yeah.
24 now.
Yeah.
So a young man, you've had your experience and your purposefulness, and you're setting a model for him. How have you seen that bear fruit in your son?
Well, yes, my son is the most compassionate, loving person that I know. He's an amazing leader in his own right. Absolutely so proud of him. Life is a struggle, right? I mean, I practice these skills and tools every day, all day long. And life still throws curveballs at us. And I think, I've mastered it, right? I'm feeling really good about where I am. And then pow, something else happens and I have to work from my tool belt, pull out my skills and tools and say, gosh, which one do I use? Because I'm really going to have to work on it now. So I'm constantly learning and growing, and he is too. I mean, that's life. And then when we don't, we're dead. So we're happy to be doing that and helping to spread the message. And by the way, that's the last component in the formula is compassion in action. And that's when you have the courage to step outside yourself and take what you've learned in life from your experiences, both good and bad. That's called wisdom, and use it to help other people. I believe that's why we're here. That's what I'm trying to do through the Choose Love movement. And amazingly, it's gone viral. There are about 15,000 schools now in every state. The Choose Love movement is now in 120 countries. And literally, I say we're trying to create the world that we want to live in, one that is safer and more kind.
I'm curious to know how this movement finds itself either aligned or in conflict or running in parallel to other kinds of movements, like anything from criminal justice reform movements or victims' rights movements.
I think love is a thread that is woven in all of these movements. I think that we want the same thing. We have different approaches, but I think love is what ties it all together. And so I think we're perfectly aligned with the other movements. And I think we're a necessary part of that.
Ultimately, what we all want is healthy relationships in a world where we feel like we can trust the other people around us to not harm us. And so, on the one hand, healthy relationships require forgiveness, require us like giving other people the grace to understand that sometimes we're not our best selves and we don't want to perpetuate the violence that is done to us onto the next person. And at the same time, there is this question of setting boundaries in order to protect ourselves or to protect the people that we love. How does your thinking and your experience and your formula that you've created address the issue of, on the one hand, forgiveness, and on the other hand, boundaries and the tension between those two responses?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what forgiveness is.
Mm.
In fact, I got a lot of pushback in the beginning about even using forgiveness as part of the formula. And it's interesting because I just want to say it's kids' favorite character value. They call it a superpower. They say it feels so good to let it go, and you can teach forgiveness. I think that forgiveness and boundaries go hand in hand. Forgiveness is releasing the hold that the hurt has on you, the event, the circumstance, the interaction has on you. It's about releasing pain. It's about not carrying that with you. It is also about erecting boundaries as well. It doesn't mean that you have to have a relationship with that person that hurt
Mm-hmm.
you. I think people don't understand that. It just means that you're letting go of the power that that hurtful event, situation, or interaction has on you. It doesn't mean that you have to stay in that situation, that you even have to communicate to the person that you've forgiven them. This is something that you do yourself. It's a beautiful idea, though, to talk about that boundaries are really important, and especially in the terms of forgiveness, that it doesn't mean that you need to continue to be hurt. You get out of that situation, but you don't have to carry the pain with you. And that's an incredible distinction to be able to bring up.
I 100% agree because I think you're right. When people hear the word forgiveness, what they maybe think you're saying is, oh no, it's fine that happened. And it's like, no, no, no. I'm not saying it's fine. It's totally not fine at all. The difference is like this emotional reaction. Do you feel the impulse to like hate and hurt in response to the pain? Or do you feel the impulse to release and feel compassion? I feel like that's the key of forgiveness, is that it's, instead of holding on to these feelings of anger and even a desire to hurt in response to being hurt, it is the desire to heal. And I feel like that, at least for me, is how I experience forgiveness. Also, because I feel like there's this really key thing that happens that I think distinguishes between post traumatic stress or post traumatic growth, which is, are we holding on to the life that we feel like we should have been living as opposed to the life that we really are living? If I was going to hold on forever to the fact that I never should have gone to prison, or if you were to hold on to the fact that, like, Jesse never should have been murdered, and that's just where you were sitting psychologically every single day, you're going to find yourself incapable of living the life that you actually have and having that locus of power be within you.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, living in denial, of course, I didn't want Jesse to be murdered. You didn't want to go to prison. You can't always choose what happens to you. You get your power back in how you choose to respond. So I find myself in a situation that was devastating. And, I could have stayed in that space, but I didn't want to. I knew that I had to be a role model for my son. And I had that word in my mind, joy. That's what I want. How do I get there? And, I even had a woman come in and talk to me. I'd never met anybody who had lost a child to violence. She was 20 years out. And I thought, like, where I started was, am I going to survive this? The pain was so great. And so she walks in the room and I'm like, wow, she's 20 years out. Okay, the first thing is, yeah, you're going to live. And then she starts telling her story. And about 5 minutes, 10 minutes in, I put up my hand and I said, thank you so much for coming in and showing me, that I am going to be okay. But that's your story. And that's not going to be my story. I'm going to have my own story. And it was right then that I realized, okay, I create my own roadmap. From here out, it is my choices that I make today and every day that are going to determine my future. And it can be anything that I want it to be. If I want it to be joy, it will be joy. I do not want to be stuck in the pain. And this woman was, and she was talking about thoughts of revenge. And I did not want that. I wanted to move beyond it. And I had to figure out how. And I think that the Choose Love movement is how I was able to figure it out. I was studying all of this and asking experts and reaching out and reading books for myself as much as it was for other people so that they wouldn't have to go through the pain that I did.
I'm curious to know if you found yourself in conflict at all. I can also see how the expectation, especially of a mother losing a child, especially to violence, is that you are like that other woman and her story, and you are grieving and having vicious, malicious thoughts about the person who harmed your child for the rest of your life. Because I've certainly had people assume that after everything I'd been through, I must hate any form of law enforcement and want to tear down all systems whatsoever. And it's understandable. People are very surprised when they find that that's not my reaction. And the expectation is, you are hurt by this thing, therefore you must hate this thing. And if you don't hate this thing, is there something wrong with you? Or are you not hurt, really? Did you somehow go through this without being hurt? It's so frustrating because it's almost like if you don't perform your hurt, it's like people don't think it actually existed. Have you had that experience of people respond to you and going, you're not grieving properly, you're not angry enough, you're not hating people enough? How do you respond to that kind of messaging if you've received it?
Oh, absolutely. From the very beginning. Absolutely. I've had people be angry at the fact that I've forgiven. I've been told that, I should be angry and in mourning for the rest of my life. And people don't understand, my wanting to feel joy or, that is erasing Jesse and pretending like this didn't happen. And of course, people, yes, I mean, of course, we've had people say that Sandy Hook never even happened. And all
but
the way
not
to
because
that.
you
And-
were acting like you were trying to reclaim your life
Right.
again. They were just being insane.
I honestly think that those people were given an alternate reality, like, do you want to think that 26 people can be viciously murdered in elementary school? Some people can't handle that amount of lack of safety, and they don't want to believe that that's true. They have young kids. Or do you want to believe that this is just an actress and here's somebody to blame and take all of your anger out on? And so, there are people that will take the easy way out, what looks like to be the easy way. Of course, that way out is never going to be part of the solution. I've had some anger directed at me for how I chose to respond, but really in my own life, I know that I just want to live the best life that I can. And I know that that's what Jesse would want. That's my way of honoring him. It's my way of honoring all children. I serve children and educators in the Choose Love movement, and I believe that they deserve the best. We know how to keep them safe. We know how to reduce and prevent mental illness. And we just have to do the things that are there that we know are the right things to do based on science and outcomes. And so that's what we offer. And I think it takes a while for society to catch up, and they will. But I don't really care what people think. Everybody can have their own opinion. I don't read opinions. I remember there was one time where I had a reporter, I think from the Washington Post, call me and say, "Did you know that people are trashing your book online?" And I said, What are you talking about? And he said, "You're not reading the comments on your book, Nurturing Healing Love."
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, I never read the comments." And he's like, "Oh, well, this is going viral. And what are your thoughts about it?" And I think I said, my thoughts about it are that this guy from Australia wrote me and said, "I'd never even heard of you. I'd never heard of your book except for the bad comments. And so I decided to buy 12 copies for all my family."
You can learn more about Scarlett Lewis and the Choose Love Foundation at chooselovemovement.org.
In the meantime, get lost with us. Find us on Bluesky at amandaknox.com.
At wisecracker.bsky.social.
On Instagram at amamanox.
At mccarbon.
You can help support our work by following or subscribing to Labyrinths wherever you listen to your podcasts. And sign up for our free newsletter at amandaknox.com to get the latest on all our work.
Labyrinths is brought to you by Knox Robinson Productions. This episode was written and produced by us, along with our managing producer, Andre Sapp, and our assistant producer, Charlie Darnell. Our theme music is by Josh Budo Karp.